Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. So we're going to apply our minds once again to statement analysis. It's kind of a pseudoscience. It depends on the person, on the investigator, and their knowledge of often the people. You can have a very good person who's really good at statement analysis in one case and they're terrible in another one. Right? You can also have someone who's pretty good in many cases and then not so good in another one. A lot of it relies on context. You need to know the people involved, you need to know the circumstances, and you also need to have an eye for detail. So in this episode, we are going to look at some of the statements made by both Donald and his wife Candace, and we're going to try and see if there's anything to note in these statements. Before we get to that, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do like, share, leave a comment, and let's get started. So I'm going to be playing 3 short audio clips from WJHL, and I'll put the original clip in the description so you can listen to the whole thing. But essentially we're going to break it down into 3 smaller clips and concentrate on specific words and some specific uses of grammar that are kind of unusual and kind of surprising. Not one instance of it, but basically 3. We're not going to pay too much attention here to things like affect or body language or things like that. We're going to look more specifically at semantics. Okay. So first of all, I think it's very significant that Donald has provided a scenario of an abductor plus a vehicle. In his version, he says, and this is a quote from him.
Personally, I think someone came up here and grabbed her and ran down the hill.
I think so
and
too.
Threw her in a car and drove as far away as they could from this area.
So when you're doing proper statement analysis, you really want to play the statements over and over again. That is going to give you a sense of not so much the baseline of the person, but the baseline of the statement. It's giving you a sense, a feel for where it's coming from. You're also getting a sense, so you can listen to it on one occasion, listening to the words, and it's very important in statement analysis to transcribe, to write the words down, and then to study the words, study the word choices and sort of ponder, are these the natural word choices? So in this case, what Donald says is, personally, I think someone come up here and grabbed her and ran down the hill and threw her in a car and drove as far away as they could from this area. Now there's quite a lot to take from that. First of all, he starts it off with personally. Even that word is quite strange. It's almost like he's saying it's personal. But irrespective of that, to me, by far the most important part of that statement is where he says, as far away as they could from this area, right? If you take it a little bit further, nowhere in that statement does he mention Summer. He says grabbed her, threw her in the car, and also says drove as far away as they could. Now the they could sounds like it sounds like, how many people are we talking about? Is it a couple? Is it, how many people are we talking about here? It also refers to actions like come up, grab, ran down, through. Quite a lot of things going on there. It's not just one thing. It's not just that someone took her and drove away. It's come up, grab, ran, through, right? But essentially the thing that stands out to me here is what Donald is essentially saying is Summer's long gone. She's far away. That statement is saying, don't look here. She's far away from this area. Those are his words, far away, right? The other thing that I think is worth noting is he says, I think someone come up here, someone, and then he refers to they drove away. So it goes from singular to plural. That is sometimes a problem in a case like this. It's not always, but it can sometimes be a problem when someone changes the singular to plural or the other way around. The other thing that he does, and this is, going into the area of body language to some extent, he nods his head as he refers to someone throwing summer into a vehicle. And often, if we nod our heads while we're saying something, we're trying to add emphasis. There's conviction there. It's an interesting turn of phrase as well, throwing. It suggests Summer is no longer conscious in his mind when he talks about this version, when she's put into the vehicle. If you think about Chris Watts, did he throw anyone into his vehicle? I don't think so. But as Donald says, drove away as far as they could, and then it becomes plural. When he says that part, he seems to shake his head. It's subtle, but it seems to be him shaking his head as he says that. Now, I suspect that what needs to be happening is the search needs to be centered around this house, around the property. It is very easy to overlook things there. One other thing I noticed when I was just looking at the footage was the ladder in the background, the ladder behind them, and it just made me wonder, should people not be looking at the top of structures, inside trees? In other words, well, when I say inside trees, I mean higher up on trees. Instead of focusing on the ground, maybe some of the searching needs to be more vertical, right? That was just something that occurred to me while I was looking at the footage. Then the second thing is going to be dealing with Candace's statement. Now, I'm not dealing with it here. You can go through Candace's previous statements. I think I made a video of it previously. There's a link in that video. You can listen to all of what Candace says, but she also never says Summer's name. And that is so-called distancing language. It can be distancing. It can be, you don't want to refer to her too directly because it makes you think of her in a kind of a visceral way, in a picturesque way, and you don't want to bring those thoughts to the surface by actually saying her name, by actually acknowledging her. That can be the case, but it's not necessarily the case. The thing I want you to take note of, and it's a little bit garbled in this particular excerpt, but in her statement, it's noticeably in the past tense. And it's not just that. It's not just that it's in the past tense. There's also what sounds like, I could be mishearing, it sounds like she then changes it to the present tense. Let's listen in.
She was the angel, our blessing, the love of our life. She's what made our world go around.
So if that's true, if Summer really meant so much to Candace, why has it taken so long to make this appeal? Also, why is this appeal so lethargic and flat? And some people have been saying they don't see that. They don't see a lack of effect, right? And I get that. You could say, it's not necessarily an indication of anything. But I know if my dog was missing, I would be pretty agitated. I'd be appealing to people. I'd be providing information. I'd be making suggestions. And I don't think I would be talking about my dog in the past tense either. So once again, what we've got to do here is transcribe that statement. And when you transcribe it, as I say, you need to often play these statements over and over again to get a sense, not of the ordinary baseline, but the baseline of the statement itself, to get a sense of what is going on in the statement, right? And then you want to look at things like mismatches. So first of all, she says she was the angel, and there seems to be a slight moving of the head. It could be her shaking her head, and how many 5-year-old children are angels? Mothers may think of their children in that way, but anyway, she says she was the angel, and then she almost interrupts that. She almost contradicts herself and corrects herself and says, or blessing. So is she a blessing or an angel? And then the love of our life. And that's something you might want to play a couple of times to hear exactly what she's saying, because what is she saying? She doesn't seem to be sure what she's saying. She says, she was the angel or blessing, the love of our life. She's what made our world go round, right? Now, besides the past tense, all of these words are weird to describe a child. And it might also just be, you need to get to know Candace, get to know her vocabulary, get to know the way she speaks. That could be the case. But it does seem to be a weird way to describe a 5-year-old, love of our life, right? It's not love of our lives. It doesn't seem to be including Donald. It doesn't seem to be including anyone else. It's a weird, almost transition back to singular, unless it's just someone ignorant about grammar. But she says, love of our life. And then she also doesn't say life. Does that mean she knows what's really going on? Or is that just a case of she's worried? And then there's a muffled correction to what sounds like an adjustment to the present tense, right? She's what made our world go round. She's what made our world go round, not she's what makes our world go round. But the she's what is almost, she's what is a way of saying she is or she was. And it may feel like she's saying she was or she is, and she's not sure what she wants to say, right? And then thirdly, someone mentioned a very weird word, and that's really what we want to think about here, is in quite a descriptive section of the segment, she says, I'm scared someone is hurting her. And then you see quite a reaction. You see quite a lot of effect at this point. You see her eyes bulge, her eyes roll, right? And then she says something like, it smothers me, meaning it sounds like she's saying, my concern that something's happened to her is making me feel claustrophobic. It's making me feel worried. And that feeling of fear and grief is like a smothering feeling, an oppressive feeling. Now, again, you could say that Candace isn't very good with words, that she's perhaps not so well educated or so well versed in what she's trying to say, but it's nevertheless a strange word to use. It's a very strange word to use in the context of what she's trying to say. So the question is, does that word mean anything? Think about it. It's an incredibly strange word to use to describe feelings of anxiety. It suggests claustrophobia, but it's unusually descriptive, isn't it? Well, let's have a listen.
And so I went down there to check, and she was nowhere in sight. She was just gone. Always answers me. And so I went down there to check, and she was nowhere in sight. She was just gone. And she was nowhere in sight. She was just gone.
Now you can play the original clip, and when Candace says these words, you actually see the most change in her face. You see quite a lot of expression. You see a kind of a look in her eye, and if you think about the generalness of what she's saying, that she went to check on her, she wasn't in sight, so meaning she couldn't see her, and then she was just gone. And one wonders whether that has application to something that happened at that swimming hole. If you can't see someone who's swimming, then when you do see them again, then they can be gone, right? And that is something that does happen often with small children. I'm not going to play too much further from the excerpt. You can listen to it on your own, but at 3 minutes 47, Candace says something further about we miss her so much, and she shakes her head. So that is a good opportunity to again hear her getting a sense of, is it a mismatch or is it just the way that she is? Is that her way of showing emphasis? Now, it's easy to dismiss that and say, maybe she's just shaking her head from the distress, but at the time that she does that, she also blinks slowly. It's the same slow blink we saw on the Sermon on the Porch. And those slow blinks are something that often is shutting out the outside world. It's shutting out certain thoughts. When you really want to engage with the world and say, and appeal to people and say, please help, instead you're sort of shutting people out.
And there's nothing I can do about it. It smothers me. It smothers me.
So an alternative way to interpret that is that is exactly how she's feeling. But the alternative is that, well, there is a lot that she can do. She can search. She can make appeals. She can, try. There are a lot of things you can do when you're looking for someone, right? You can put up a reward. You can put up posters. You can head on to the police station and find out what is going on. You can knock on people's doors. You can make appeals and appeals and appeals. There's a lot you can do. And so this early on to be saying, there's nothing I can do, there seems to be a sense of resignation. Now, before I conclude this episode, I want to read a comment that someone left, and I think it's the other side of the story, which is we need to be careful of being judgmental. We don't want to judge poverty. People's perception of neglect can be formed by their own norms. To some people, it's too many bought ready meals and not changing the towels daily. So you could argue that though a little ramshackle, these kids were in fact having a free-running, idyllic childhood, running barefoot through the woods, playing in natural swimming pools, making dens at one with nature. Like the Waltons or something like that, poor but healthy and happy. Just maybe you could argue some of this a bit actually, right? I do think we're not talking about a situation where kind of a harmless situation. There is very likely foul play. And where there's foul play, you've got to look at precursors to that. In other words, patterns of behavior that play into that. You've also got to look at what we know from true crime intertextuality. So while I think it's sensible to be careful and sensitive to the people that we're dealing with and we're trying to get to know them, we've also got to be careful not to be naive. In terms of judging poverty, some people who are poor make their situation worse by doing things that aren't good for them, like abusing alcohol and other things. And so in that sense, I don't know whether sympathy in that sort of thing is justified. The other thing that I think requires us to pay quite a lot of attention here is the unsolved disappearance of the aunt. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.